Hi, thanks for joining us today. Super excited to have colleagues from Glint, which is now part of LinkedIn, with me today, Amy Lavoie and Archana Ramesh. Archana, Amy, thanks for being here.
Great to join you.
Thanks so much for having us, Al.
Now, you all have been part of Glint for a while and have done some amazing work that talks about the role of feedback, and it's all over the press. Everyone thinks, oh, we got to give feedback better. And there's a general consensus that it's not done really well. And you have a point of view on how data technology insight can facilitate these conversations better. So if you would introduce yourselves a bit and let us know what's going on there at Glint.
Sure. Amy, why don't you go ahead?
Great. So yes, I'm Amy Lavoie. I am a regional director on our people science team here at Glint. So just a little bit of background about myself and how I've kind of come to this this place in this conversation today. So I spent many years working internally within HR in learning and development, and also as an HR business partner, which I absolutely loved. But I kind of started to feel like I was spending an awful lot of time as a compliance officer. So, I believed in the things that I was asking leaders to do, but I wanted them to just want to do it without having to, hound and remind and threaten to get the right things done.
A reasonable expectation.
Yeah. So I after grad school, really found myself attracted to the world of employee surveys, feeling like that is just such a powerful, really a fuel for HR functions to motivate leaders to do the right thing. And I will say that, after many years kind of working in that space as an external consultant, I started to kind of feel a little disenfranchised again because, it felt like surveys were these powerful sources of information and motivation, but you meet with a customer 1 year after the survey went out and ask how things were going and what's happened since. And they would often really have trouble articulating that anything had really changed since, we last presented their results. And you probably, seen the research or heard the research that 80% of leaders believe their engagement initiatives are not actually driving organizational outcomes. Yep. So that's when I discovered Glint, and it really felt like the missing piece, that if we could, make this great data easier for managers and leaders to get to and use quickly, that we could really maximize the impact that people insights have on an organization.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's been really fun.
A noble pursuit, no doubt, and to your point, it's not easy when we talk about human behavior and trying to really get insight and appropriate ideas on how to influence them in conscious ways. So, yep. Archana, how about you? How did you enter this field, and what's your role there at Glint?
Yeah, so I'm Archana Ramesh, and I'm a senior people scientist over here at Glint. And like Amy, I spent many years first working internally within organizations, doing things like HR business partner work, as well as doing talent management work. Interestingly, I've done a lot of work all the way from thinking about org development in Russia to union avoidance in Florida. So kind of done the gamut of many different things in the HR space.
Wow.
And what I found really compelling about Glint was actually, I was on the other side of the table evaluating vendors as part of our people listening strategy. And what I loved about Glint and instantly fell in love with was how they were bringing the science and the research to bear, but doing it in a very innovative way using technology to its fullest potential. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the frontier that we need to really cross as a field, right, within HR. How do we bring all the research and the decades of experience and expertise we have in this field, but do it in a simpler way through intuitive technology that's really smart. Yeah. Seeing that Glint had really kind of figured out how to do all of this well, I knew I needed to be part of the journey, and that's what brought me to this organization.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing. And for a bit of context, I worked in the survey space since the early 2000s, and at the time, and I'm not going to point to any vendors, but there's a lot were still paper-based. Obviously, it was a different time. ability to be responsive was much slower than it is today, obviously. Fast forward, despite being in the future of work, did not see the level of disruption happening in the survey space and thus action planning space that I now see. I'm not surprised in looking back, but looking forward now, I'm even more excited about our ability, not only as organizations, but as managers and individuals, to learn appropriately and learn what actions are working and not working. And I know you there at Glint have spent a lot of time trying to solve this problem, because as you were saying, Amy, that much of what has been done historically has been suboptimal at best. In some cases, it's been counterproductive. So, Amy, coming back to you, what's going on there at Glint? I know you have a lot of points of view and tools that support this solution to this problem that we're identifying. So can you speak to what's going on?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, I would say, it's always been something that has kind of been at the center of what we're trying to do here is, using people insights to fuel change and fuel organizational success. And we had this really interesting moment last fall. We have an annual summit where we bring in some of our top Glint customers and really let them kind of share and talk with each other about how they've solved problems. And there was this really interesting pattern that was surfacing. And despite the amazing things that so many of our customers were doing with great technology, the impact that they had, the insights they had surfaced, there was still a lot of discussion about it's hard to get people to complete action plans. And so, they were struggling with managers aren't completing the plans. The managers who were completing the plans were starting to burn out because it took so much effort. And we also ask a question in our surveys, which is the wording is, I believe meaningful action will be taken as a result of this survey. Mm-hmm. And it consistently has a really high impact on engagement. And yet it's one of the lowest scoring items in our benchmark. And so that was just such an apparent need amongst our customers that even with great technology, we were still, they were still needing support with what I really think of as a mindset shift around the organization to kind of let go of some of the ways that we've approached this problem in the past and start to think about it in a new, lighter, and more integrated way. So that's really what actually launched our research into why is the traditional form of action planning not working? What's the real problem that we're trying to solve? And how do we enable managers, which is really where we believe is the point of real change happens. How do we enable them to do it better without it being an HR compliance exercise, but with it really being kind of fueled by their own needs and wants.
Yeah, absolutely. Archana, I believe you have something to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Amy said, we really recognized that there was a problem where a lot of the effort and energy and momentum around survey efforts is sort of burnt at the front end of the process. So you really lose a lot of that momentum when it comes time to actually taking action based on the feedback, which is actually where we have the biggest impact, as we know. So being researchers, being true to our spirit, we, as we started to think about this problem, took a step back to understand why is it that so many organizations who are leading in so many different ways are still struggling to take action based on people's feedback. And what we found was a couple of things happening here. One is what we found is that ownership of taking action is very unclear. Even when we were researching this topic, we found that most often employees were associating action taking based on feedback with senior leadership in HR. And we think part of that is because in many organizations, it's still not practice to have this data in the hands of managers to take action on. So a lot of times employees feel that, this is something that senior leaders or HR needs to own. Even in organizations where the feedback is put in the hands of managers, it's usually still a long lag time. So it's still weeks and months where HR and every level of leadership is digesting the information. So by the time it's put in the hands of managers, it's, first of all, there's a lot of time has passed and other things have taken over. But also it creates this sort of mindset that it's HR and leaders to own this data and to own the action versus for managers to feel empowered that this is their data to own and take action on. So that was something that we were finding over and over again was part of the problem. The other piece was that the process just doesn't feel simple. We see this a lot, right? Of course, at Glint, we believe that frequent feedback is really core to how you make people data part of the way you operate as a business. But we find that a lot of times organizations come to us thinking, wow, we spend so much organizational energy around this once a year survey. How can we possibly do this more than once a year? That's because a lot of these survey taking and action taking processes tend to be so cumbersome, where there's just a big heavy lift, and we haven't figured out yet how to make this feel simple and how to build habits around this. One of the things we say often is if you only do this once a year, you only have once a year to practice this. So how are you ever going to get better at it, right? And so how do we make this process simple? How do we make this continuous? How do we just make it part of the way that we do things so that we really can build these muscles and these habits over time?
Yeah, I absolutely love what you just shared. I got a chill. I'm so geeked out about it when you talk about habit formation. And I know Charles Duhigg keynoted your event last year, which, by the way, if you can have it in a more beautiful place this year, I would appreciate it. For those who don't know, it was at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and one of the most beautiful places on the planet. So, but just to pick up on this notion of habit formation, and for me, there's a lot of talk around employee experience design, which is not exclusive of the experience of managers, and that's rooted in, process. How do managers engage with the data? How do they learn? How do they take appropriate action? And to facilitate that process or that mindset shift, you all have an approach that's captured in the acronym ACT. Amy, if I can toss it over to you, can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, so, one of the things that, as Archana was alluding to, that we found has kind of become a barrier to actually acting and changing as a result of feedback is that we've historically approached it as an event. So a survey is the event, and then we have all these things to do related to that big event. And what we realize we need to do is, instead of focusing so much on this survey action plan, we need to focus on great conversations. We think that if we can start to build a habit around great conversations that happen regularly between a manager and his or her team, that essentially becomes a fuel for giving and receiving feedback, for collaborating on solutions, and for creating accountability on the thing that we've chosen to focus on. So imagine a new world where every month as a team, we've committed to talking about our people goals. And those conversations happen regardless of whether there was a survey. If there happens to be a survey, we get new data and new input to help us have that conversation in a better way. And so what we've done is we've created a great conversation framework that's survey agnostic and that really encourages deeper learning, deeper connection, and one small shift coming out of each conversation that we all as a team commit to doing together, that we then check in on a few weeks to see how it's going. And we either keep doing it or we shift again. And that's really the way that work happens today. You try to create a plan and you get 1 weekend and the organization has changed and priorities change and the team changes. And so we really want to create this in a more agile way. And we think that at the heart of that is having great conversations.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. I mean, I get giddy talking to you two about this because there's so much literature out there in psychology, for example. And I think about the book Nudge, right? Where it's just an incremental change that can deliver big results. And so there's this convergent of individual and organizational psychology, technology, digitalization, and frankly, the way people are working that is enabling these new insights to be generated, yet we don't have the kind of inertia to really leverage these insights. And so that's what I hear you all doing, is providing that framework, providing that mental model. thing that is absolutely necessary, and I know you'll agree with this, and Archana, I'm going to kick this over to you. To have great conversations, you need psychological safety. You need to feel that the insights and feedback that you're providing are going to be held in a high trust and positive way. So, Archana, can you speak to that and how you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. When we thought about and kind of had this aha moment of how we shift the focus around action taking from spending 80% of our energy on coming up with this really big, cumbersome action plan to how we spend 80% of our effort on ongoing conversations that fuel this, we realized that conversations obviously need to be very intentional about what we're trying to solve for and what we're going to do what we're going to do as a team. But it has some really powerful effects that are even unintended consequences. And one of those is that it really helps build trust on teams. It really creates that forum for increasing psychological safety. What we mean by that is, so as part of these conversations, we really encourage a manager to come in and say, okay, so we just had a Glint survey that was completed and results that came out. Here's a couple of things that I took away from this, from the feedback. What do you guys think? Am I understanding this right? What are we doing really well as a team? What is it that we need to focus on improving as a team? And then, so that's right after a survey comes out. But then, as Amy mentioned, this is not dependent on a new survey coming out, right? This is something that you can check in on regularly. And what we really encourage as part of these check-in conversations is to be really open about successes that we've had, but also things that maybe didn't go as planned and challenges that we faced, and really having this be an opportunity for continuous learning and shifting rather than feeling like we have to come up with a perfect plan that we need to execute on. And so having managers really role model this, but then having members of the team use this as an opportunity to share learnings, talk about what's working well, what's getting in their way of improving outcomes, really fosters greater trust and connection on the team and creates better psychological safety to have the conversations that matter, but we might not be comfortable having. So that's really at the heart of this. And we know that conversations that are based on feedback are hard to have for many different reasons, right? So as human beings, of course, we tend to avoid difficult conversations for a lot of reasons. But the more we do this, again, this goes back to the idea of building habits. The more we do this, the better we get at it, the more trust we create on teams to really feel like they're in this together and that they can solve and really improve outcomes for their team together.
Yeah. Amy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say two additional things. That our founders, Jim and Gotham, have always said that while we are a data and technology company, ultimately what we're trying to do is use data to have more meaningful, better quality, and hopefully more frequent conversations. And so in some ways, the data is also serving as a way of creating psychological safety for the employees and for the manager. You have this forum, this confidential forum to provide feedback. If you tried to have that conversation absent of data in a team that had not established psychological safety, it would be really, really hard. But you get your survey results, you realize that there are themes and patterns that a lot of us are feeling, and it kind of breaks down some of the walls and some of the hierarchy associated with it, and it becomes more of, okay, we have this data that says we have an issue with, for example, how we collaborate or how well we trust each other. And it gives a forum, kind of opens the door to difficult conversations. So that's really the point of the data. And actually we did user interviews with managers to really, kind of watch how they interact with data, watch what they do with the process and interview them on how they use it. And a consistent theme is that managers say they find the most value from the conversation. The data tells them where to start, but the conversation is when it really comes to life. And again, once it becomes everybody's problem, because we're collaborating on what we prioritize, collaborating on what the challenges are, and all committing to a solution, that's really when the magic happens.
Yeah, and as you're sharing this, I'm reflecting on the transformation Microsoft has gone through over the last several years with leveraging a growth mindset. And it is based on this insatiable curiosity and willingness to learn. And historically, I think managers have been put in a difficult place where I have to manage people. I almost have to have an omniscient wisdom over what this individual's experience was. And that's not ever the case. So what do I, as a manager, have to do? I have to stay in curiosity and compassion, and create that safe place for that person to express what was going on. I can then learn, coach, advise, resource, whatever, the case may be. So I don't know which one want to take this, question, but if someone's listening to us right now, they're saying, well, they're talking about talent management, they're talking about culture, or they're, but the data are very important or critical. Amy, you just alluded to this. And many organizations are implementing technologies and they're expecting insights to just come and changes to come. But it takes work. It takes process. It takes some forethought, and to almost be cliche, beginning with the end in mind. What is the experience of manager? What is the experience of the employees that you want? And then enabling the data to be created that in turn facilitate these better conversations that you're talking to. So my pointed question is, how does Glint generate the data? What is that data? What does it look like? Can you either of you speak to that?
Yeah, let me jump in here. So part of the thing that we think is really critical to this mindset of ongoing and continuous improvement and shifting through continuous conversation is making sure we're being very focused in what we're solving for. We see this happen a lot. So you get survey feedback. There's lots of things that are surfaced that could be potential for improvement. And then we come up with a list of 10 different things that we need to solve for, get tiger teams put together, and launch this sort of massive effort around solving for all of these different things. What we find is, of course, we'd be lucky if a few months later we've done any one or two of these things successfully, right? And so we do believe that focus is really critical. And that's where we can really allow technology to do most of the work for us. So rather than spending hours and weeks getting into the data, slicing and dicing it in every single way and reading through every single comment, why not let artificial intelligence, machine learning surface the insights for us so that we're taking the guesswork out of what is it that we need to focus on improving. So let technology do that front end work, and then you then do the work of making sure that you're having these continuous conversations in a meaningful way. And Al, the thing that you pointed out about the role of the manager, that's so critical to this, right? It's not the role of the manager to fix engagement for their team. The role of the manager is to really hold a space for these continuous conversations and absolutely to role model the behavior that they're expecting the rest of the team to engage in. So when we shift that mindset around what is it that managers really need to do here, I think it also creates a little bit less burden on managers to feel like they need to be the ones to fix the problems, and more so to how do I hold a space for the team to collaborate on doing this in a very focused way.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And again, I'm geeked out about this way too much because I'm literally getting chills talking to you too. Amy, you wanted to add to that as well?
Yeah, so this has kind of been an obsession of ours kind of from the beginning of our journey, is how do we make it easier for managers to get insights through the technology quickly, so that, again, to Archana's, such well-stated point, they're moving very quickly from insights to the good stuff where the change starts happening. And so we have a couple of different reports that Archana was alluding to that help to do this. We use some advanced analyses related to impact to very quickly show managers what their strengths are and what their opportunities are. And sometimes opportunities might be something that you're doing well that's just so important to engagement that you need to build on it. So really, not necessarily that it's all built on deficits. We also have just rolled out what we call manager concierge, which is essentially kind of a wizard who is going to walk the manager through how to interpret their data, what to focus on, what things mean, and ultimately working towards getting them ready for the conversation. And then a third thing I would point out, and there's a lot more, so Archana, feel free to chime in if I miss anything, is that very quickly, as soon as we as soon as the technology is offering manager what we think is the biggest opportunity for them based on the algorithms and artificial intelligence, they can very quickly click on ideas for how to improve that area. And so these action resources that are really focused on quick changes that they can make alongside their team, really get them to quickly, instead of kind of getting into analysis paralysis, which is always very easy to do when you have survey data. We're really trying to use the technology to guide them quickly to, now what should I do?
Yeah, absolutely love it. Archana, did you want to add to that?
I think it's very well stated. The other thing that, of course, I know we've been on this podcast before to talk about is the power of using narrative intelligence and qualitative feedback to round out your understanding of the key issues, which is where, again, making sure that we've built the intelligence into the platform so that it's surfacing key themes and key insights and sentiment from the qualitative data, so that a manager can understand, well, if an opportunity area for us to focus on is empowerment, what does this look and feel like, right? What are people saying about empowerment? So really allowing for that greater understanding so that they can go into that next conversation, having a much more informed view on what the issues are, and then use that to propel the conversation forward.
Got it. Yeah, love it. And just to recap then, you all at Glint are bringing not only your thought leadership, but your years of data science and IO psychology into the fore in crafting the data that in turn gets analyzed, that shed insight, that in turn facilitates appropriate action. Would that be a fair through line there?
Absolutely, and I would just say, and then it fuels that appropriate action through the conversations that are being had as using this data, right? And so I know you alluded to this earlier, Al, but that's some of the work that we've been doing recently is coming up with a really simple framework for how managers can have these conversations. So you mentioned it spells ACT, so acknowledge where we are, collaborate on where we want to go, and take one step forward. So that's the framework that we've developed, and we have simple conversation prompts that a manager can use to practice how to have this conversation really well. And hopefully with repetition, it becomes just part of the way that we do things, and action taking happens as a result of these continuous check-ins, because we're making progress and we know what we're making progress towards.
Again, I celebrate what you all are doing individually as researchers and as a firm. And as we start to wrap up, I've long talked about this and written about it because I'm very passionate about it, particularly as a father, not only in my role as a professional. Is that it's my belief that we as humans, after the basics, want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to be empowered. Rarely do we want to be told what to do. Certainly we don't want to be ignored or invisible. So what I'm hearing is that you're offering that. You're offering a way that people can be seen, heard, and not necessarily told what to do, but offered ideas, in some cases in an automated way, of how they can improve their effectiveness as a manager, potentially as an individual, and so forth. Again, is that a fair recap?
Yeah, I think that's so beautifully said. And it's sometimes we have to kind of step back and reflect on how so many of things that we're trying to do just come down to really basic human needs. And I think we are at our best, and Glint is at our best, when we kind of get our HR programs and systems out of the way and help to facilitate that human connection, and to really, unlock the power of all of the people that we've invested in and hired in organizations, because there's just so much power and so much magic at that team level. So it's really ultimately what we're trying to create here is good fuel for a great conversation and great organizational improvements.
I like that notion of fuel. That's good stuff. Archana, any closing comments as we start to wrap?
Just that it's been really, really fun to actually kind of understand how to solve for this, right? How do we solve for action taking in organizations? And to Amy's point, really coming up with this idea that conversations are the fuel for ongoing action, and ongoing success for organizations. And so how do we help managers and teams have ongoing conversations in a very simple, easy to learn way so they can build habits, build the muscle, and just, again, make it part of the way that we do things.
Yeah, fantastic. Amy, closing thoughts?
No, I will just say that we have been sharing this with our customers. As I said, they've been asking for support on this area, and we just have gotten such an overwhelming response back about the excitement of this kind of this shift, and really being able to bring the technology to life and help give managers tools to do this even better. So we are really excited to get this out there and start to see how organizations respond and continue to get better at this.
You have every reason to be excited, as does your community. So how can people learn more and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we have lots of resources and information. We've already published some blog posts about this on our website at glintinc.com. And also feel free to connect with me or with Archana on LinkedIn, Amy Lavoie or Archana Ramesh, and we'd be happy to share more information with you and continue this dialogue.
Well, yeah, again, you two rock, and your firm is doing great things, and celebrate what you do, and wishing you all the best, and see you soon, yeah?
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Al.
All right, thank you all. Take care. All right, bye.